The day an HOA decided it deserved a key to my land was the day my stomach turned to ice because I watched their community event set up like a traveling circus on protected ground, and then the earth started to tremble under their pop-up tents. I saw a massive bison bull step out of the tree line like a living wrecking ball, slow and certain, and I saw Tracy Whitmore, our HOA president, slam her SUV door and lock it like a kid hiding from a thunderstorm. And in that moment, with the whole neighborhood staring and the drone camera buzzing overhead, she finally realized what I'd been saying for weeks. HOA rules don't outrank nature property law or a conservation easement. My name is Megan Carter. I'm in my early 30s, and I moved to Cedar Ridge Estates because I wanted quiet, wide sky and a piece of land that still felt like the West hadn't been completely fenced off and branded into amenities. What most people here didn't bother to learn, because why would they, right, is that my back parcel isn't just extra grass. It's Parcel 17C, a narrow corridor of open prairie that connects a state-managed preserve to a stretch of national forest, and it's under a conservation easement. That means I can't pave it, I can't build a cute little guest house, I can't throw parties back there, and I sure as hell can't turn it into a weekend carnival, because that land is supposed to stay quiet for wildlife, especially during migration season. I actually like it that way. I spent months restoring native grass, cleaning out old debris, putting up the signs mapping the boundary markers, and learning the patterns like you learn the habits of an old dog. Speaking of dogs, my Border Collie Scout is 12 years old and has the kind of instincts that make you feel stupid for ever ignoring them. The morning it started, Scout froze at the back window, ears up tail, stiff, that low warning sound in his throat that he only makes when something is off. I walked out with my coffee expecting maybe a coyote, maybe a stray, anything normal. Instead, I saw white tents, folding tables, a bounce house, and 3 pickup trucks lined up along the edge of my corridor like they owned it. And standing in the center of it all, wearing a red blazer like she was running for governor, was Tracy Whitmore, HOA president, smiling so hard I swear her cheeks looked painful. Next to her was Brad Collins, the HOA's little enforcer, clutching the community handbook like it was scripture. I marched down the slope, my boots cutting through the frosty grass, and I didn't even say hello. "Tracy." I called out loud enough to turn heads. "What the hell is this?" She turned with that practiced smile, the one that says I'm going to patronize you and then act offended if you don't thank me. "Megan." "Oh, perfect timing," she chirped. "We're setting up for Cedar Ridge Spirit Weekend. Isn't it exciting?" I stared at the bounce house like it might start talking. "This is my land." Brad stepped forward like he'd been waiting for his moment. "It's open space," he said, tapping his handbook. "It's not fenced, no posted address, and it's adjacent to the neighborhood." The board voted. I actually laughed, just a sharp little sound, because my brain couldn't decide whether to be angry or amazed by the audacity. I pointed toward the weathered sign 10 yards away. "Private Property Conservation Easement. No trespassing." "You mean that sign you're pretending doesn't exist?" Tracy waved her hand like she was brushing away a fly. "Oh, those signs are old and dramatic. They scare people. We're trying to build community, Megan. You know, positivity." "Positivity doesn't erase deeds," I snapped. "Or the easement." Her smile tightened. "You don't need to get hostile." There it was, the first move. Step 1, trespass. Step 2, call the owner hostile for noticing. I told them clearly, calmly, and with my jaw clenched so hard it ached, that this land wasn't HOA common area, it wasn't open space, and it wasn't negotiable. I even walked them to one of the boundary markers, metal stakes stamped, mapped, documented. Tracy looked at it like it was a suggestion. "Look," she said, dropping her voice into that fake sympathetic tone nobody wants to fight. "But the neighborhood needs a place for events. The clubhouse lawn is too small. This space is perfect, and frankly, it's been sitting unused." I felt my face heat up. "Unused by you doesn't mean unused," I said. "Wildlife uses it. It's literally protected for that reason." Brad scoffed. "Wildlife? he repeated like I'd said unicorns. It's just grass. I wanted to scream. Instead, I walked back up to my house, hands shaking, and I opened the folder. I keep like a lifeline. The deed, the plat map, the conservation easement documents, the email from the state confirming the restrictions, photos of the signage, GPS coordinates, all of it. I called the state wildlife office. I called the county. I emailed the HOA management company. I attached everything. And because the universe has a sense of humor, it was a weekend. Every voicemail said some version of, "We'll get back to you Monday." Meanwhile, Tracy was moving like she was racing a clock. By Saturday morning, Spirit Weekend had multiplied. More tents, more cars, speakers blasting some chirpy playlist, a grill smoking, kids running around with neon wristbands. Someone had hammered little stakes into the ground for string lights. I watched a pickup truck cut ruts into the prairie like it was nothing like the land was a parking lot. Scout paced the kitchen nails, clicking on the floor, that anxious energy feeding my own. I marched down again, folder in hand, this time the way you carry papers when you know the other person is going to pretend reality doesn't exist unless it's printed in 12-point font. Tracy was posing for photos with a banner that said, "Cedar Ridge Strong," like she was the mayor of a small country. "Tracy," I said, and she turned annoyed now. Not sweet. "You're done. Right now. We're in the middle of setup," she replied, louder than necessary so people would listen. "We can talk later." "No," I said, and I opened my folder right there like I was presenting evidence in court. "This is the conservation easement. This land is legally restricted. No large gatherings, no structures, no amplified sound. And you're in the middle of migration season." Brad leaned in, eyes narrowing like he was searching for a loophole he could weaponize. "Who signed that?" he asked. "The previous owner," I said. "And it runs with the land. Forever." Tracy's lips pressed into a thin line. "This is a neighborhood," she said, "not a nature documentary." I held her gaze. "If anyone gets hurt, if an animal spooks, if there's damage to habitat, your HOA is liable. Individually." I watched something flicker behind her eyes. Fear, maybe, or just irritation that I was making her look bad. She shifted into her favorite tactic, the public performance. Everyone she called out, turning to the people nearby, "Megan is upset because she thinks she owns this space." I felt my blood pressure spike. Thinks. As if my deed was a mood. I don't think I said, voice shaking now. I do. "And I'm asking you one last time, leave." A couple of neighbors avoided eye contact. A few looked guilty, but most just looked uncomfortable, like they'd rather be anywhere else than between HOA drama and a bounce house. That night, after the noise finally died down, I sat on my porch with Scout's head on my foot, and for the first time I felt something worse than anger. I felt small. Because it's one thing to argue with a person. It's another thing to argue with a crowd that's decided your boundaries are inconvenient. I stared out at the dark line of trees and the shadowy slope where my land started, and my thoughts got ugly. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe I was being too intense. Maybe I should let them have the stupid weekend and deal with it later. Maybe the easiest thing was to stop fighting and just let it happen. I even imagined myself apologizing in that HOA Facebook group, typing something pathetic like, "Sorry for the misunderstanding. I hated myself for even thinking it." But exhaustion does that. It makes you doubt what you know is true just because you're tired of defending it. Then Scout lifted his head and let out a low growl, deep, steady. Not frantic. Alert. I stood up, heart thudding, and listened. At first I thought it was wind. Then I felt it, this faint vibration through the porch boards like distant thunder that didn't match the clear sky. A rumble. A heavy, rhythmic sound. The kind of sound you don't hear in suburbs. I grabbed binoculars and walked to the edge of the hill. And there, at the far end of Parcel 17C, shapes moved between the trees. Dark, hulking, impossibly solid. Bison. Not one or two. A whole line like a slow river of muscle and fur following the corridor exactly the way the biologist had described in those reports nobody in the HOA bothered to read. My mouth went dry. This wasn't just a told you so. This was a disaster about to happen. And then something snapped inside me. Not fear, not doubt, but clarity. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't the villain of a neighborhood Facebook group. I was the person standing between a protected migration route and a bunch of folding chairs. I ran inside, grabbed my camera, and started taking photos. Wide shots that showed the tents, the signage, the boundary markers, and the bison moving closer. I called the state line again and left a message that probably sounded like I'd swallowed a megaphone. Then I called someone else, Rachel Nolan, a local reporter I'd met once at a county meeting. She picked up on the second ring. "Megan," she said, surprised. "If you want a story," I told her, voice tight, "get here. Now. HOA, trespassing on protected land, bison migration. It's happening." There was a beat of silence. Then, "Oh my God!" Rachel breathed, and I heard keys jingle. "I'm on my way." Sunday morning, Cedar Ridge Spirit Weekend went full-blown carnival. Tracy had a microphone, a little stage, a banner that said, "Community Unity," because nothing screams unity like ignoring the law on someone else's property. I watched her from the edge of the corridor, my hands cold, Scout at my side, and I listened to her voice carry over the grass like she owned the sky. "We're so proud," Tracy said, "to create shared spaces where our families can thrive." People clapped. Kids squealed. Someone handed out branded water bottles. And then the rumble returned louder now. I saw heads turn. A couple of people laughed nervously like it was part of the show. Then the first bison stepped into view, huge and calm, and everything changed. The bounce house kept wobbling in the breeze like it didn't get the memo. The bison didn't charge. It didn't roar. It just walked, heavy hooves pressing into the earth, moving with the kind of quiet authority Tracy had been faking all weekend. A second bison appeared. Then a third. A line of them, and behind them more. The crowd's mood flipped like a switch. You could hear it, the shift from fun event to, "Oh no." Someone yelled, "Is that real?" Another person screamed, "Get the kids." Chairs scraped. Coolers tipped. The vendor table wobbled as hands grabbed at products like it was a fire drill. Tracy's microphone squealed with feedback as she backed up, still trying to keep control. "Everyone remain calm," she shouted, voice cracking. "This is under control. Under control." I almost choked on a laugh. She was standing on protected land she didn't own, facing an animal that outweighed her SUV, and she was still trying to run a meeting. Brad rushed up to her, waving his arms like he could direct wildlife with HOA bylaws. "Ma'am," he hissed, "we should call someone." Tracy snapped, "I am someone." And then the bison bull, bigger than the other's shoulders like a moving hill, stopped right in front of Tracy's SUV. Tracy ran to the driver's side, yanked the door open, scrambled in, and slammed it shut so hard the whole car rocked. She locked it. Twice. Through the windshield I saw her face pale, furious, terrified lipstick too bright against the fear. And that's when Rachel arrived. She didn't stroll in. She practically sprinted, camera in hand, and behind her a drone lifted into the air with that angry bee sound that makes everyone look up. I heard her mutter, "This is insane," and then she started filming everything. Tracy's stage, the crowd scattering, the bison moving through exactly where the HOA had put their unity banner. It felt surreal, like the universe had decided to testify on my behalf. And the best part, if you can call any of this a best part, was that the bison didn't even care about Tracy's performance. They walked right past the stage, right through the heart of the setup, as if the tents were just weeds that had sprouted overnight. One of the string lights snapped loose. The banner tore and flapped like a surrender flag. The bounce house sagged as the blower hose got yanked in the chaos. And Tracy, trapped in her SUV, slammed her palms against the steering wheel, yelling words nobody could hear through the glass. That's when Officer Ben Lawson pulled up at the edge of the corridor with another vehicle behind him, State Wildlife Enforcement. I don't know if it was my message or Rachel's call, or the fact that half the neighborhood was now filming Bison walking through an HOA event, but they were there. Ben stepped out, scanned the scene, and his expression didn't even twitch. He walked right up to the group of HOA volunteers who were still trying to corral people, and he said plain as day, "Who authorized a gathering on protected conservation land?" Brad opened his mouth like he was about to cite a section of the community handbook. Ben didn't let him. "I'm not asking about your HOA," he said, holding up his badge. "I'm asking about the law." Tracy's door finally cracked open, and she stepped out slowly, trying to stitch her dignity back together like it hadn't been shredded in front of everyone. "Officer," she began, putting on that syrupy tone again, "this is a misunderstanding. We believed Ben cut his eyes to the sign, then to the stage, then to the tents." "You believed wrong," he said, "and you were warned." Tracy's head snapped toward me like she wanted to burn a hole through my skull. I met her stare, and I didn't flinch this time. A man I barely knew. Ethan Price, one of the quieter board members, walked up to me, then face-tight phone in his hand. "Megan," he said low, like he didn't want Tracy to hear, "I have the emails. The ones where she said you'd cave if we made it a community tradition." He held up his screen. "She told people you agreed verbally. She told us you were just difficult." I felt something twist in my chest. Not surprise, just that sour confirmation of exactly who Tracy was. Rachel swung her camera toward Ethan's phone, capturing the evidence like it was gold. Ben took statements. Wildlife Enforcement started documenting damage ruts, stakes, trash, the whole messy footprint of Tracy's ego. And right there in the open in front of the neighbors she'd been trying to impress, Tracy's little kingdom collapsed. There was no dramatic arrest, no handcuffs, no slow clap. It was worse for her than that. It was paperwork, citations, official language that didn't care about her title. As the officers moved along the corridor, one of them said, "This could have ended with injuries," and Tracy's face tightened like she'd been slapped. She tried one last time. "This community needs leadership," she said, voice shaky, "and Megan has been uncooperative." Ethan didn't even look at her. "Leadership doesn't mean trespassing," he said. "It means listening." By late afternoon, the HOA event was dead. The tents were coming down. The stage was being dismantled with a kind of embarrassed urgency. Kids were gone. The music was off. The only sound left was the wind and the distant grunt of Bison moving deeper along the corridor, exactly where they were supposed to be. I stood at the boundary marker, Scout pressed against my leg, watching Tracy pace near her SUV while Ben talked to her with the patience you reserve for someone who has finally run out of excuses. Then Ethan walked over again and said, "The board's calling an emergency vote. She's done. Effective immediately." Tracy heard him. She stiffened, mouth opening like she was about to scream, but nothing came out because for the first time she didn't have a room, a microphone, or a handbook that could save her. She just had consequences. I didn't cheer. I didn't celebrate. I didn't even feel victorious the way movies pretend you're supposed to. I felt steady, like I'd finally stopped shaking after being cold for too long. I turned back toward my land, toward the tall grass rippling in the wind, and I watched the last dark shapes disappear into the trees, calm and unstoppable, like the world's oldest reminder that some boundaries aren't negotiable. Lesson learned. If someone needs to break the rules to build community, what they're really building is a trap.